Just listening. See if this is doable. It says I have viewers, but it doesn't tell me who they are, unfortunately. So you'll have to introduce yourselves in the live chat window. That's the one disadvantage. Periscope at least would tell me who was live, but YouTube does not seem to do that. It says I have 5 concurrent users, which I find hard to believe, but if anyone has something to say, whether you do it on Twitter or you do it on YouTube, hopefully I will see it. It looks like there's a serious delay. Ooh, hello Michael, and hello Bennett. Bennett's somebody who was always interested in this sort of thing, because he always wanted to do a show with me. So I'm still trying to get my chops together in order to be able to do something like that. But how's it going, everybody? If I get smarter about this, I'll be able to maybe even add something like Skype to it so that people can actually talk to me. Hello, Atsuva. Nice to see you. Oh, it looks like more people are doing this than the Periscope, or maybe, I can't really tell. But this is cool. Everybody needs a little bit of community when we're all stuck at home in quarantine or self-quarantine or social distancing or anything like that. But if there's anything you guys want to talk about, just bring it up and we can talk, or anything else. But again, there is a delay, and it's probably at least 10 or 15 seconds is what it looks like to me, is what the delay is. So I apologize for that. But let's go for it. And then if it really works, then maybe one day I'll set up a scheduled show. I'll probably do it with Mrs. Elder, or maybe we can do it online. Again, Daladamos would be a great partner for something like this. But in order to be able to do interviews or something, we require a little bit more work on my part. But it took me about an hour to figure out how to do it on Twitter, and another hour how to do it on YouTube the way this is. So it's everything's doable. Anybody have anything to say? Because I don't have anything planned. Anything you guys want to talk about? Or I'll just start rambling. It's not much. I'm just looking at what I use TweetDeck, and I'm just looking at what's scrolling down there. If anything interesting. It was a very busy day, as usual, on Twitter. There were a lot of anti-Semites are coming out of the woodwork. The Rosanna Arquette was very interesting. But as I think I mentioned in the previous stream, the Arabs, who've been generally trying not to be, to cross the line from anti-Zionism into anti-Semitism. Thank you, Atsuva. They're really turning, explicitly anti-Semitic. It's really absurd, and I'm not even showing everything that I'm seeing on these. There was one guy who, I don't know if it's Syrian or a Lebanese newspaper, but he started off one of his articles just saying, oh, by the way, Israel has worked on biological warfare in which they were trying to only infect non-Jews. Right before talking about coronavirus. He didn't quite put the two together as saying that was, that's exactly what coronavirus was, but he certainly implied it. It's crazy. the stuff that's out there. And this is like every day now. Just going through my blog, since you're still here for some reason. So again, I didn't, you know, the link dump's always good to look at. You know, that's always great. The raining eggplants video, if you didn't see that I had put that on Twitter, that's fairly cool. I don't know if sound works if I'm doing this. It might be the only sound that works is going to be what you hear through my microphone this way. But this was a very funny video that somebody in Iran put together.
اون چیه اون پشت؟ اون چیه؟ اون یه چیزی داره میرسه. یه چیزی داره.
بیا اینجا.
There was raining eggplants. This guy apparently is a he does special effects. That's his job, and which is very, so it's a funny video. But Iran arrested him. They figured out who he was and who is the people, the camera people, and the other people that were running away. You know, apparently running away from the eggplant, and they arrested them because I'm not sure why. I have no clue what law that might be that they were breaking. Then we have this guy who said, this is, I actually thought this was very interesting because thank you for saying the sound works. I'm glad you can hear me at Suva. I appreciate that. Oh, the sound worked for the other one. Oh, thank you. But I think it was from my speaker going to my microphone. I don't think it was going directly. I might be able to set that up, which would make it easier. But this way it was probably a little echoey. But this guy, and here he is, this he has this essay called "Know Your Enemy," which was pure anti-Semitism, and it was from Lebanon. Although it looks like he's a big fan of Syrian socialist movement. That's a movement that's been around for a long time, and it's explicitly anti-Semitic. It's very interesting. This guy, again, and it's socialist. I mean, it's pure socialism. This is the sort of thing that, I mean, maybe I'll bring up another, it was SSNP. It might be interesting just to look that up. Here's like an Australian branch of this SSNP that I found. This was, Sydney, Australia, SSNP, which is, again, Syrian, I can't remember what it stands for. But it's a Syrian socialist national something. It started like in the 1930s or something like that. But it is, it was founded by this guy that was mentioned in this article. That was mentioned in the Lebanese columnist article, whose name was again Anton Saada, and he was completely anti-Semitic. And if you look through this, this Sydney site, again, this is a regular Western thing from Australia. They're not embarrassed by any of this. If you go to, and again, apologies for not planning this, but it is interesting. If you go to their ideology and you go to their basic principles, and I think it was the 4th or 5th basic principle. The Syrian nation is the product of ethnic unity of Syrian people which developed throughout history. Okay, again, I don't have a big screen over here to show it to you, but so it says, the Chaldeans, the Palestinians. Oh, they want, by the way, these Syrian nationalists say that Syria extends from the Sinai all the way up to, I don't remember where, somewhere in Turkey. So they're fans of Greater Syria. All of Israel is part of what they want. And they're mentioning all of these states that are certainly part of it, Aramean, Canaanite, the whole bit, which is fine. But this principle cannot be said to imply that Jews are a part of the Syrian nation and equal in rights. That's ridiculous. Why would Jews be that way? The interpretation is incompatible with the principle which excludes the integration of elements with alien and exclusive racial loyalties to the Syrian nation. In other words, we'll allow a lot of different old, ancient nations, the Canaanites and the Hittites and everybody else. They can be Syrians, Chaldeans, the whole bit, but not the Jews, because the Jews are different. They're separate, which, I sort of agree with them on, but it's, but nevertheless, it is, I mean, this is pure anti-Semitism. That's part of this SSNP. And by the way, if you want to look at what the logo of the SSNP is, There you go. It's very similar to a swastika, even though they started in the 30s. They claim they had nothing to do with it. But if you look at the Wikipedia, Syrian Social and Nationalist Party, look at the Wikipedia entry, you can see that it was clearly inspired. In fact, their anthem was based on the Nazi anthem. So these guys really have it going for them. They're really, really anti-Semitic. And so this columnist, and they're still around, and there's still thousands of people that follow this, anti-Semitic Syrian socialist movement. It's very funny, and I'd like to know what, today's flavor of socialists think about the SSMP, because it's explicitly anti-Semitic, and they claim that they're not. It would be really, really funny to ask them what they think about this. But anyway, this guy says that, Saada, the person who was the founder of it, who died as a martyr, as they call it, like around in 1941 or something like that, as he was trying to set up his version of Syria state, the Syrian state. He says, Jews are our enemy, and not only the Zionists. It's clear the differentiation between Judaism and Zionism is one of the Jewish deceptions meant to distract from danger of the Jews for the entire world. Which means that, according to these guys, Jewish Voice for Peace is just part of the plot in order to try to convince the Gentiles that there are good Jews and bad Jews. There is no such thing. They're all bad Jews. So I thought that was interesting. I thought that was a very cool thing to let people know about. And then here's another article that was in an Arab newspaper. This one was this guy, Asad al-Azuni, who, as I found out, he won awards, and he's not like a nobody just writing on on his own little social media channel. He writes for a number of things. He's on TV. He's writing about Jews. Of course, Jews started World War I and World War II, and of course they're Khazars. They're trying to the Israeli Khazari Zionist Talmudic terrorists. That's pretty good. He's catching everything in one phrase. Not bad. And of course the Mossad, together with the CIA, created coronavirus and sent it to China, and of course there was a reason for it. It's virus washing. They're doing that in order to distract the world from Israel trying to annex parts of the West Bank, which I didn't think that Israel was trying to hide that so well. But that's what he's saying. It's the same logic as pink washing. He says that we're engaged in virus washing. We decided to unleash this virus in the entire world so people wouldn't notice. So this is like seriously anti-Semitic stuff. This is every day nowadays in Arab media. And of course, none of the people that are consider themselves progressive will ever admit that Arabs are anti-Semitic. I mean, Gallup polls, Pew Global surveys, every couple of years ask the question, and consistently, by far the most anti-Semitic countries, including the Palestinians. The Palestinians, Jordanians, and Lebanese are always 1, 2, and 3, and Egypt is up there too in the higher than 90% of the people that hold anti-Semitic attitudes. It's the way it is. It's you can't deny that. The other article I had today, since I still have 4 people that are watching, feel free to say something so I don't feel like I'm really talking in the air. But this one I thought was interesting too. This is just a small article that was in Ma'an. Oh, sorry. Let me try it again. It's a small article talking about, okay, there's this General Union of Palestinian students that are in Hungary. And they wanted to volunteer, the ones that had medical background or public health background, they wanted to volunteer to help anybody in Hungary that might need help for the coronavirus. It sounds really good. But the statement literally says, after they say, hey, we're going to do this, and we have no idea if anybody is doing this, we have no idea if there's a single volunteer of the Palestinians, but they're announcing it, they're putting out a press release, and then they say, we can be proud of this act and the human feeling of solidarity with this Palestinian act. As long as we are still Palestinians, our human feelings and morals are driven by the reality of the tragedy, oppression, looting, and diminishing of our national and human rights due to the occupation and its daily criminal practices against our people for more than 70 years. So they can't just say, hey, we're going to volunteer. That's it, which is good enough, which would sound good, and everybody would say that's great. But instead of just leaving it at that, they have to say, no, we're great for volunteering, and by the way, Israel's evil. So it's just, as I said, can you imagine a Jewish group saying, we're proud that we're really great and moral for volunteering to to drop off food at people's houses. Can you imagine that they're saying, hey, we're going to announce this and we're going to tell everybody how great we are, and by the way, we're doing this even though the Gentiles have been trying to kill us for 2,000 years. I mean, this is just, it's insane that this is considered normal, but this is what the Palestinians are doing, and it completely destroys any goodwill that you might have had for them. I mean, they're not even thinking when they say something like that. They're just saying, anything we do is single-mindedly to destroy Israel in one way or another, whether it's a PR, whether it's real bullets or anything, and it's so much a part of the culture. It is almost unbelievable that you hear that sort of thing, that they don't, and even this thing I have over here, my first post for the day, is the same sort of thing, in which this guy, the Israel Apartheid Week is pretty much a failure this year because of the coronavirus, because it's all centered on campus, and the campuses aren't open. So I'm sure they're trying to do some online things or something. But at any rate, I was struck by the point that their logo or their slogan was "United Against Racism," and one of them had this guy named Ahmed Al-Naok. I never heard of him before, but he seems to be a fairly, well, good-looking, charismatic guy from Gaza who managed to get out of Gaza, and he works for a couple of anti-Israel NGOs, and he started his own NGO called We Are Not Numbers, and he's, he looks like he's probably going to be a very effective propagandist. You want to keep him in mind. He might be a very interesting guy. But I just thought, when I was looking through his Facebook page, and he had an article from last month in which he mentions that, and this just as an aside, and he only wrote this in Arabic, even though his Facebook page is both in English and Arabic. He only mentioned it in Arabic. He says, a few years ago, and this is in 2013, the Al Monitor had an article called "Black Palestinians Shrug Off Racism," in which it talked about the racism that black Palestinians see, mostly in Gaza. I think I might have been talking about the West Bank too. I've seen articles very, very occasionally about this sort of thing. It's not a huge problem. I'm not going to say it is. It exists. In the whole Arab world, it exists. There's racism. I'm not saying it's a really, really terrible thing, but it definitely exists. They're definitely looked down upon. People don't want to marry their daughters off to a very dark-skinned person. And it happens all over the world. I'm not, saying the Palestinians are more racist than even Americans are. I'm not even trying to say that, but it exists. So he saw this article and he said, "What? We don't have racism in Gaza." This is what he's writing in Arabic. So he decided to write an article that would refute it. He started interviewing people in Gaza. That's where he lived. This is like 2017. He started interviewing dark-skinned people in Gaza. There's actually a neighborhood called, okay, I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's the Al Abid neighborhood or something like that, which means the neighborhood of slaves. It's still called that in, I believe, Gaza City. And he looked at it and he was like saying, he started talking to them and he said, you know what, there is racism. It does exist. But here's the funny part. After he published it, and he published it in Gulf News, I believe. After he published it, the Ministry of Interior in Gaza contacted him, and they said, you're a traitor. You're trying to distort Gaza's image by saying this. And he was like, I'm just telling what I said. I interviewed people, and this is what came out. And they're saying, no. You, and this is the real rule, and this is the thing that the West just does not understand. The rule is, for every Palestinian, you do not say anything bad about Palestinians or Palestine to the West, or in any place that people are going to be able to find it, because that detracts in their mind from what they're trying to do with, sorry, Mrs. Elder just walked in. I want to tell her that 7 people are watching me on YouTube right now. But at any rate, hello. She says hi. But nothing that as a Palestinian can do can detract, from the how holy, how sacred their cause is. And if somebody says something realistic, that there's racism, which again could be said, I'm not saying that's as a negative. There's racism everywhere. It's not a it's not a terrible thing, but it exists. But nevertheless, if they say that, they that makes it look bad. You cannot do that. And we saw this during during the wars that Israel had, in which if Hamas shot a rocket and it killed people, they would immediately claim it was Israel that did it. This is the sort of thing we've seen many, many times, and it is and it's crazy. And what's ironic about it is that if they would actually talk about their real problems, then they could solve their real problems. The way they want to set everything up is saying everything is Israel's fault, and we have no responsibility for anything that happened. And if they were mature enough to actually say, yeah, we screwed up over here, here's something we could have done better at, then they would be in much better shape. Everybody would have more respect for them. Israel would have more respect for them. And the chances for peace would go up a great deal. But but this is not, it's part of honor shame. If it is shameful to admit that there's anything you're doing that's wrong, or that's subpar in the Muslim world and in the Arab world. And so they can't do that. Everything has to be based on honor, and there can be no shame. Shame has to be avoided at all costs. This person shamed the Palestinians of Gaza by saying, hey, racism exists. It's not a terrible thing to say that racism exists. But that was, so that we know, so the person that recognized that there's racism in Gaza is the person that's speaking at Israeli Apartheid Week on United Against Racism, because to them, there's only one racism in the world, and that's the racism of Jews. Okay, I'm down to 5 concurrent viewers, so I couldn't have been that stunning in my presentation. But if anybody has anything else to talk about, any questions, any comments, is this something you guys would like me to do more regularly? Should I set this up more professionally, which I can. It's certainly possible. I have tools that I can do it. It just takes time to set up. So if you like this sort of thing, I could try to do it more often. Or I could, again, video and do it a little bit more professionally, and then just put it up as a podcast, which is also a possibility. I've done that in the past together with Mrs. Elder, and we've always been talking about restarting that. But again, I'm just trying to see what my options are. And the thing I like about YouTube is that you can give me comments, even though nobody has for a number of minutes. But if that's the part that sounds cool, for this, is that we can get feedback live as we're doing it, and I'll play with this. Listen, I'll see if I could set it up. The next thing that I would, this is interesting. I'm not sure if I like the YouTube as Bernie Sanders calls it. Look up the YouTube. I'm not sure if I like this YouTube interface as well and what it can do. Maybe I can find something better. But this is interesting, and as my viewership is dropping further, if you have anything to say, let me know. If not, I am going to be ending this stream. You'd like to have a podcast, Michael says. Again, I've done it in the past. You can listen to our old ones. They're on the website, and I did set it up in which you could actually have it come up. To show if you could put an address in your podcast player, and it could show up. It takes time. Sorcerer's book, Bennett, okay, is asking me, Sorcerer's book not selling well. I think that's probably true. Because it really isn't doing well. She's, she certainly is great at self-promotion, but Twitter is, and Facebook, it really is inside baseball. It really is a tiny universe that doesn't affect as much. It affects things. It definitely does. And certainly the news media gets a great deal of stuff out of that. I honestly don't know how effective Sarsour was as an organizer when she was in Brooklyn, or still is as an organizer. The book doesn't seem to say much, to be honest, from what I could tell of it. I was only reading the free parts of it, so I don't know if the book really says much. I mean, it wasn't that. It gives some background in her family, and then it talks about her, what she managed to do as far as putting things together, and it's fairly self-congratulatory. I just, she isn't that important a person. But there's another thing you can think of also, which is that people don't want to pay. The people that like her are not the type of people that are going to actually like her enough in order to be able to pay money for her. So they might want to go to her talks or something if they're free. But I'm not sure. There's a line there. In which if somebody has to pay for something, that cuts out 90% of people altogether. So who knows? It's a good question at any rate. We're down to 2 people at this point, so in order to save my voice, I think I'm going to sign off now. But give me any feedback you can, whether it's on Twitter. Well, I guess I'm going to close this. I'm not sure if I'll see if you're giving me any more feedback here. So give me any feedback you can on Twitter. Give me any ideas. Maybe I'll do it again tomorrow night. Who knows? If I plan it, because this one I didn't plan at all. But we'll see. Thank you very much. I appreciate the 8 people at the height that actually came and listened. And I wish I had more statistics on it. That would be helpful. But at any rate, thank you very much. Have a good evening and stay healthy. Bye.